Welcome to This Week in Morgan County. I'm your host, Russell Mokhiber. Our guest this week is Glenn Nelson. Glenn is with the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. He's a coordinator with Save Our Streams. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you went to school around here. Give us a little bit about your history, where you went to school, what you studied, what you've been doing since.
Sure, that's a pretty loaded question, but so yeah, I definitely did go to school at Shepherd. I got my bachelor's degree in there. I'm very fortunate because they didn't have an environmental program at that time, and so a lot of friends and colleagues, we were already working in the field, and so we brought in a very diverse knowledge, be it GIS or me more aquatic. At the time, I was working at USGS, Leetown Science Center, so I was in the field. I was a field biologist, still am. But we actually formed that environmental program at Shepherd, and so it's super
What year
strong.
was that? What year was that?
Oh my goodness. I guess that'd be 98, because I graduated in 2000.
Okay.
And then after that, I was still working with USGS full-time, traveling the whole East Coast doing mussel surveys to horseshoe crabs, and didn't want to give up that job because it was definitely my passion. And so I went to Hood College to get my master's degree in aquatic ecology.
And how did you become interested in water?
Besides it being the most important thing in this world, it's always been something that I've been very passionate about. Being a military brat, it was something that I was always drawn to. Pre-Facebook, pre all the social media and ways you can stay connected in this world. So when we'd move, you pretty much picked up and left. And so with that, water was always a friend. My dog was always a friend. And so we definitely grew up in that arena. Also just an avid fly fisherman, love fishing, period. And there's so much to be explored in the water environment.
What is West Virginia Save Our Streams? What is that program?
That's a good question. So let me answer the easy part first. And so West Virginia Save Our Streams, it's a citizen science. And so hot topic, actually it wasn't even recognized in the Webster Dictionary until 2014, I believe. So citizen science, public science, meaning I can empower you all to get out and test for water quality. And so West Virginia Save Our Streams is an offspring of the Isaac Walton's program, which is also Save Our Streams. But when you have so many Laurel Creeks or big runs just in this state alone, to look on a national database to find any kind of information on that stream, as you can imagine, would be pretty tedious. And so in the late 90s, or about 90-ish, I think, Isaac Walton League actually offered all states the opportunity to take that program. And so I got the torch passed to me. Actually, my supervisor now was the SOS coordinator prior to me taking the job, and he did an awesome job. And so with that, West Virginia is one of the strongest Save Our Streams programs in the nation currently.
And this is the state spending money to teach young people, citizens, about their streams. Is that what it is?
It is. And so my first priority are two watershed associations throughout the state. So there's roughly, give or take, about 64 watershed associations throughout the entire state. And so they are formed by volunteers, most of them. Very few are paid positions, but for the most part, they're volunteers. Definitely depend on volunteers. They're formed for various reasons. As you know, West Virginia is a resource extraction state. We're kind of blessed and cursed with that. But with that is people form these groups usually because of issues, be it mining, be it currently the pipeline or Marcellus Shale, but it can just be because you care about your waterway and you want to get out there and you want to test them. And so when it comes to West Virginia Save Our Streams, I teach 3 different metrics. And so the very first metric, you get out there and do chemistry. So you're going to test for like dissolved oxygen, the pH, conductivity. All hands-on, all taught to you while you're out there in the hopes that you're going to take that knowledge and then either get with a watershed association or become educated enough that you can adopt your own stream and do a survey once a year is all you need to do. And it's amazing what that can tell you too. The second thing that we go out and look at is the habitat, so riparian zone, how much vegetation is on the creek, how far does it extend from the center of the creek. There's other things too, like bank stability. You want to keep that soil out of the creek because you can suffocate fish. The bugs that are the last part that we look at is that biological part. By far my most favorite part because they tell you everything you need to know. Hopefully I'm not stealing my thunder from later in this interview, but the bugs live roughly in the water for about 2 years. Aquatic, all of them. And then as adults, most of them climb out of the water or hatch out of the water and become very short-lived adults. And so the reason that they're so important to my job and showing you about water quality is because we know their tolerance or sensitivity to water pollution. And so if you're finding those sensitive bugs and you're finding the older ones, it tells you that your water quality has been good and it's been good for that period of time. Whereas if you're not, now you have to start asking questions as to what's causing it. Is there an insult? So by far, it tells me the most that I need to know as far as my job.
You were in Morgan County a couple weeks ago teaching young people how to test the stream. You were in Sleepy Creek, actually.
Right.
And what did you find out about Sleepy Creek? How healthy is it? You did the chemical and the stream bank and the biology. What did you find out in each of these?
We did. So I guess my first disclaimer is by federal law to make sure that we're all on the same page. My data is only acceptable as far as scientific validity from April to October. And so we were outside of the window, but that's fine. It was actually for Envirothon, which is a program that I'm involved with. And so what did we find? We found good bugs. We found those sensitive bugs. We found stoneflies, we found mayflies, we found caddisflies. So those are your top three when it comes to sensitive. And so in finding those, it's telling you that your water quality was good. And so chemistry definitely showed the same thing. Habitat was good as well. And so we were way up in the headwaters of Sleepy Creek, which sometimes, for lack of better terms, I guess sometimes usually is going to be more healthy because, you know, we all live downstream, and so any kind of insult's going to accumulate as you go downstream. Okay. Not always the case, but, and so the grand scheme of things, we all agreed that we want to go back because it was a fun time. All the kids loved it, which, you know, it's all about those bugs. And so it scored great, and as you would hope so.
Good. Morgan County has two watershed associations. One's the Sleepy Creek Watershed Association. The other is Warm Springs, which is the springs that run through town.
That's right.
And I'm wondering, have you looked at Warm Springs at all and did any testing? Or what do you find about Warm Springs?
We have. I forget how many years ago. It's probably been upwards to maybe 4 now. But there was a spill off of sheets where it ran out into the creek, and so Sleepy Creek and Warm Springs collaborate quite often. Actually, they even share members, and so it was actually my supervisor and I at that time were up here for a meeting, and so it happened while we were here. We went out there, and so what they're doing is you had that insult, you lost bugs, you lost fish. I mean, there was a fish kill and it was nasty, and so, but what they're showing is that water, if you leave it be, Mother Nature, if you leave her be, can be very resilient, and so you're seeing those bugs start to come back. It's definitely insulted. As its name implies, it's warm, which is going to limit some bugs. You know, you're not going to have trout in it. It's also urbanized. You know, it's channeled going right through, and so that definitely doesn't afford the best habitat. And you can see that in the bugs and the water quality. And see, that's one of those things where it's habitat driven mostly, and then being, you know, paved all the way to the banks in a bunch of situations, and then also, you know, all the runoff that's associated with all that impervious surface. And
what is Envirothon, by the way?
Envirothon, it's a national, I think it's even international now. I know that Mexico and Canada are in it, but maybe North America, don't quote me on it. But what it is, schools can get groups together and they actually teach independently, and then we have this huge test in April, a 2-day test, to where they do things like forestry, soils, animals, and then the aquatics. And so obviously I'm with the aquatics, always dubbed the hardest, but we kind of take that with some pride, just because we want to really emphasize that. And so it's a national program. It used to be put on, or at least funded by Canon, and I don't know if they still.
By who?
Canon? Yeah, like
the
filmographer, yep. And so I don't know if they still sponsor it, but long and the short is the winners and get to go and compete against all the other states and Canada and Mexico for the top prize.
And these young people you were with here in Sleepy Creek, they were heading towards Envirothon, or they're in the program?
So they have till April to test and become comfortable with the actual Envirothon criteria. And so, yeah, not everybody asked me to come out and help, but it definitely benefits those that do.
How long have you been with Save Our Streams?
Well, it's kind of funny. It's a full circle. Go back to Shepherd. we had a gentleman come to Shepherd one day and actually do the program. We went down to Town Run, which is right there next to the school. And that was 2000, and so then add 10 years to it, and now I'm the coordinator for it. And so I've been involved. I just got my certificate saying happy 5 years, but they were actually off by a couple years, and so I'm just shy, or just over 6 years now.
And over those 6 years, you spend your time primarily going and working with young people and teaching them how to do this, or how do you spend your average day, or
It's
most of your day?
been a funny shift recently, and I mean, two things you'll never hear me talk about in workshops is politics and religion, but can't not, I guess, sometimes. But with the current political arena, you know, in this state, we just tried to do away with the water narrative, or water quality narrative, using the bugs. They said, you know, we don't want to use the bugs.
Why did they say we don't want to use the bugs?
Because they hold you accountable, and it's big.
What does that
industry.
mean, they hold you accountable?
Well, as we were talking about earlier, you know, we can tell a stream score is what we ultimately want to leave with when it comes to an SOS workshop. And so that stream score comes from the all those metrics, the chemical, the physical, and then the bugs. And so you can leave with a stream score on those bugs. And so our state uses that, and 49 other states. And so they actually voted and passed, but somehow they worded it wrong to where we as an agency are required by EPA to use the bugs, the benthics, to be able to get our score. And so we are still doing it. It's because it's a proven concept, it's comparable. And so to go back to your question.
But I want to make sure I understand. The legislature passed a law.
They tried to.
They tried to pass a law
Yes.
saying, don't use the bugs because it would look badly on the industries in the state. Is that what you're saying?
That's that hold accountability.
Okay, that would be
yes.
the thing. So
Yep.
when you said hold accountable, if you're using the bugs and you come to a determination that something's wrong, that means somebody did something wrong to make the stream, whatever, not have bugs.
Something happened to make them not
Right.
be there. Because in a perfect world, they're going to be there. And even if there's an insult, like that spill in Warm Springs Run, you know, they're resilient enough to repopulate. And so that's that accountability.
Okay.
So much so that you can lose particular bugs, and it'll tell you that particular insult. I won't put my foot in my mouth too much
Okay.
there, but yeah, they definitely
You
tell
figure
an
out
amazing story.
what happens.
That's right.
Through the bugs.
That's
and
right.
you're still doing the bugs. But getting back to what you do on your average day.
Okay, so my average day, like I said, my first responsibility is the watershed groups, but because of this weird political, don't have the answers as to why these watershed groups really aren't doing as much as they used to be. Volunteer retention is tough. A lot of people, you know, have jobs. It's hard to get young kids. They're interested, but they're also interested in all the other life events that are going on. So it's really hard to get volunteers to get out there. So for whatever reason, I don't really do a lot of workshops with the watershed groups right now, but I have been fortunate enough to get into schools, and I personally believe that it's probably where I'm best served, because you start teaching the young, you start giving them ownership and empower them to get out there and test and let them know that this is your water. Definitely do some fun skits with them too, as far as the percentage of water, and then by the time you get down, you realize there's less than 1% of all the fresh water, or all the water on our planet, that's usable to us as humans, yet we flush our toilets in it and throw chemicals and trash, and you finally look at them, do any of those belong? And yeah, they realize no, yet we still do it. So hopefully they're going to be our future decision makers. And so my typical day, workshop-wise, would be get out there on a stream, and some people 8 hours, some 6, some 3 days, depending on what they want. And so I'm very flexible, and I can definitely tailor any workshop to any need, as much as going into elementary school with a bucket full of bugs and letting them play with them. So I probably didn't answer your question the best, because it is very flexible.
Yeah. Overall, what is the status of the waterways of West Virginia from your hands-on knowledge?
Well, that would be a tough question to answer. Mainly because nobody can really agree as to how many mile streams or how many named streams, and so roughly, and I can find this answer out for you.
But off the top of your head, like how many waterways are there in West Virginia, and what's the quality of the water?
Well, there's about 40,000, give or take, miles of streams in the state, and 11,000 named streams in the state. And not to be a doomsdayer, but there's not one that hasn't been affected by human influence. people like to use that word pristine. And I mean, I've stood in some of the most beautiful streams in the state, in the world. I mean, you can really find
Here in West Virginia.
Absolutely.
What are some of the top ones that you've been in?
Well, everyone and their brother knows about Seneca Creek. Flows into Seneca rocks and all the tribs. Actually, partners of mine are Trout Unlimited, and one of my really good friends actually is the brook trout specialist in that entire area, and so they work extensively trying to make sure that this one intact brook trout stream from the mouth of Seneca all the way to the headwaters of like White's Run or Schrader's, their whole goal is to make sure that that stays connected. And we as humans have definitely disconnected a lot of streams.
When you say disconnected, what do you mean?
Dams are one of the best ways, or culverts that, you've seen perch culvert to where a fish couldn't get up there if you had to. Chemical barriers, I mean, sometimes people think a dam is the only barrier, but you can have chemical barriers too until, say, a stream comes in and it's polluted by whatever, and the other stream, the main stream's not. Ultimately, it'll dilute it out, but that becomes a barrier in the sense that you're not going to have a fish swim up through whatever the insult might be.
In the most beautiful stream, describe when you see what you call a pristine stream. What are the indicators there, just from your eyes? Can you see fish in the water? Is that what you're saying?
You can see fish in there. You can see bug life. You can actually see where they've come out. But visually, you can see that crisp, clean water, highly oxygenated, big plunge pools, lots of habitat, tons of vegetation hanging over the streams, because ultimately these leaves from the trees are going to be the food for the bugs that ultimately feed the fish. And so super connected, which if you have a brook shop, you're definitely going to hear me preach on that, the connectivity. And it doesn't mean that you can get down into a big river that it's not. Now, I won't use the pristine, but not healthy. It's different drivers. But to me, in this state, because we are the mountain state, most of our streams are high elevation. It's seeing those big plunge pools, it's seeing the highly oxygenated water, all the connectivity. There's not cows standing in the middle of it, or there's not a four-wheeler trail going through it. But like I said, you can stand in the middle of the Mon National Forest, 900 and almost 1 million acres, and you think, man, that's been that way for a long time. Surely this has to be a pristine stream. And you might be mistaken, even though it looks like it is, because of pre-70 laws or lack of laws where there wasn't the Clean Air Act or Water Act. You had the Ohio Valley that, all these smokestacks, they didn't have scrubbers, so all this nasty stuff's getting put into our air, which ultimately comes down with our rain and snow. And so you've lost a lot because of this acid rain, acid deposition. We've got actually one of the lowest recorded in the state. It was in Wheeling. It was 2.7 pH rain falling from the sky. That's like peel your paint off your car stuff. And so obviously not conducive to any form of life. And so you've got that legacy in the middle of the Mon National Forest. And currently the DNR.
So even though there's no, direct pollution from the ground.
That's right.
We're talking air pollution. But what about, we were talking earlier about the Appalachian Mountains. Describe for us what you think the streams were, let's say, pre-industry, pre-human activity, compared to now, and what we've done to the mountains, and what you believe the effect is that on the streams in West Virginia.
Whew, that's a loaded one. I will tell you that I'm haunted by that question. There's not a day that I drive throughout the state that I'm not, man, I would love to have seen that 200 years ago, pre-industrial revolution. The whole Tucker area of West Virginia, that whole Blackwater, I mean, that thing totally was denuded of spruce trees, and then caught fire. The topsoil caught fire, and they had the huge fire. It was caused by one of the Shea engines, the trains back in the day. And so how can you not wonder, what did that look like 200 years ago before all that happened? To answer your question, there would have been brook trout everywhere. And that's one of my buddy's missions, is to get 20-inch brook trout like used to be in this state. Are we going to do it? I don't know, but definitely are working towards that. And so we as humans definitely have put a hurting on our environment. I'd like to say, fortunately, we're getting better with practices. Hopefully we're not going backwards currently, but we definitely have, in West Virginia, everyone's familiar with the symbol of West Virginia. And so in the north, you've got the old Rust Belt, the old Steel Revolution. In the Eastern Panhandle, we've got some of the fastest growing counties in the nation. Berkeley County was like number 70 in the nation there for the longest time. So urbanization, that legacy, it used to be all apple orchards and stuff too. So ultimately they were putting cadmium and all kinds of nasty metals to treat arsenic, to treat for pests. Southern West Virginia is definitely the coal fields. You could definitely see mountains that are no longer mountains and valleys that are filled and streams that are gone. And so that definitely has effect. And that's one of those effects you can totally see. Highways. People don't really think about highways, but think about how many streams have been filled in from highways. And obviously it's a needed commodity, but it's one of those things doing it right. And so that's where I preach the accountability part. We can have clean water, we can have jobs, and still be West Virginia as a resource extraction state. It just has to be done right. And I should say the western portion currently is fighting with Marcellus Shale, so we definitely are surrounded.
Yes. The mountaintop removal issue, you say we can do it right. Can we do it right with mountaintop removal? Because mountaintop removal, they blow off the tops of mountains to get to a seam of coal.
That's right.
They take the fill and they put it into the valley. And how can you do it right that with mountaintop removal, Mike?
Well, if you're going to say do it right, you're going to say that we need coal. It's cheap. It's there. And so to do it right, most people would do it right would be like, don't do it. Go solar, go do something. But a lot of times you realize solar isn't, in this state especially, isn't the way to go. Wind generators, they're not always the best either. Diversify is one of the best answers, but do it right, and I'm using this lightly, if you are to do this mountaintop removal, rather than put all that overburden into these creeks, you're supposed to original contour, so approximate original contour, knowing you're pulling coal away, so you're going to lose some of that mass. What you're supposed to do is go back and put that soil, put that overburden back to make it look like a mountain. Save your topsoil, put that topsoil back up there so that you can revegetate and reclaim that. Doesn't mean it always happens, but that's the right way if you're going to, I guess, concede to the fact that we do need coal. Another way is actually if you're in a high sulfur coal where you know you're going to have a pH issue, is to put limestone over top of that. You got to think is when you blow this mountain up, you're now allowing rain to infiltrate that loose soil that you've broken up. And so it's leaching through there almost like an upside down coffee percolator, and then putting all of that into solution into your creek. So management of that. And that's if you realize, okay, we do need to do this, and so let's do a better job.
You're personally committed to water, and because you mentioned to me, for example, your dog, you named your dog
Tributary, yeah, which we only call him Trib, but yes.
And then your son's name is?
Ethan Lake, so
Ethan
middle name's
Lake,
after
okay.
water, yeah.
So you could tell you have a passion for water. And West Virginia, compared to the rest of the nation, is got to be one of the most beautiful states in the country. Primarily, I mean, one of the reasons is because of its waterways.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I live in Fayetteville. It's like the whitewater capital of the East Coast, and world renowned. You know, you've got the Golly and the New right there. Throughout the state, yes.
Could we? The question I wanted to ask is: do you think we could base our economy on water and having people come here and enjoy the water and fish and?
I do strongly feel that. Like I said, I'm a little bit partial, but and it's certainly talked about. Yes, I totally think we could definitely have a better ecotourism in the form of water, yes.
We have a couple minutes left, so I wanted to ask you about, we were talking earlier about, and I want to talk about getting back to it and whether we could actually live a more subsistence-based economy with, you know, like living off the river, as which I'm sure native peoples did. And let's talk about fishing and what your view is on the fishing as a sort of people eating the fish out of the rivers in West Virginia. Do people still do it?
They do. There's an advisory on a lot of fish and on different bodies of water. You know, the western portion of our state's bordered by the most polluted river in the nation currently. Unfortunately, the Ohio River got dubbed that devious title. And would you eat something out of there?
You
Most
wouldn't.
likely. No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't.
No, I would
you
not.
would not.
No.
Would you eat out of the Potomac?
I have, and I'm still here.
What about the Kakapen River?
Kakapen? I'd feel better out of the Kakapen than most, actually.
What about this issue of pharmaceuticals and how they affect fish?
Pretty wild. So when I was at USGS, the doctor who found that was a colleague, Vicki Blazer, in which she found that intersex fish, you know, male bass, South Branch of Potomac, male bass producing eggs. And so estradiol, I'm sure you're familiar with that, and so different hormones, and so these hormones, yeah. Do we treat for those? We don't, which I think is not too wise. To do
What do you
it-
mean treat for it? To do what? What would
So
you
we don't treat to take out pharmaceuticals,
Okay.
and so you got to think nicotine, all the people who are using tobacco products, caffeine. You don't think about that often, but just think about what we as humans take up and then excrete, and it's going into our waterways. And the only real way to treat for that would be through reverse osmosis, and so very few, if any, are fitted for that. Super expensive. That would be the only way you would be able to actually treat for that. And so the ultimate goal, I guess, is to dilute it enough, which populations rising where they are, it's getting harder and harder to do. So you're seeing that accumulative effect that ultimately now you're seeing effects on fish.
I've seen you work with kids. It's really amazing. Their eyes light up. They're really taking in their learning. It's probably, that few minutes that I spent with them, probably the best, quote, biology or back to it lesson I've seen. So if people wanted to get in touch with you and have you come out and do what you do, how would they do that? How would they get in touch with you?
So the best way is just you can either go to the DEP website or just Google West Virginia Save Our Streams. Yep.
And your contact will come up.
It will.
Thank you so much, Glenn.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you for watching This Week in Morgan County.